Well, psych. Things are kind of coming to a close. We are wrapping it up. I'm probably only talking to juniors right now. I have a few juniors. Most of my seniors have kind of checked out. I assume most of my juniors have checked out, which is completely understandable. My wife and I were just talking about how this point of the year is it gets a little goofy, and how our students are in the last 2 weeks kind of let's just say that the senioritis thing is really kind of kicking in, and that's okay. This has been a really interesting situation, obviously. Hopefully we won't be starting online next year, but I've certainly learned a lot. When I first started, it was sort of like, oh, well, we're just going to try and get this done any way possible. And now I've actually gotten my computer upgraded so I can do Teams rather than those Zoom meetings, which I guess there's a licensing issue. Zoom was all right, but the Teams seems to work pretty well. But yeah, I mean, juniors, if we are in this situation next year, which I certainly hope we are not, I think I've really gotten a handle on a lot of it. I'll be working with it over the summer too, but just an FYI, like we better be starting school. So here we are, we're at the end of the year, and now we're getting into, I've talked to you about, conversion disorders, somatoform disorders, anxiety disorders, things like schizophrenia, and even that ridiculous multiple personality disorder, and depression. So, we kind of know what the problems are, and this is all outlined. If you take a look at like the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of mental disorders, you can pretty much find anything you need. That's how we diagnose the DSM-4 and the DSM-5, which I think is coming out really shortly. So I want to first let me talk about I didn't get to antisocial personality disorder the last time I talked to you. Antisocial personality disorder is the one that kids tend to really enjoy, because this is the, what's the show on Netflix? It's a great show. This is where we get our psychopaths and our sociopaths. That's anti-social personality disorder. This typically kind of rears its head at, you can kind of tell when someone's in this kind of a category by the time they're about 15. And there's a guy by the name of Harvey Cleckley, who kind of went through and looked at what were the major characteristics of somebody with this antisocial personality disorder, which you can even group narcissistic character disorder in there as well. But charm and intelligence are part and parcel. Poise, a lack of anxiety, even when being questioned by authority figures. There's a total lack of anxiety. There's a lack of personal responsibility. They tend to lie. There's antisocial behavior with almost no remorse at all, to the point where even if you're buddies with someone who is in this kind of situation, you'll look at them and be like, what, dude, what is wrong with you? A lot of these people that fall into this antisocial personality disorder category have extreme difficulty making close friends. Now, this is where we start to find our guys like the BTK killer, which is in that Netflix show. What the hell? Anyway, I don't have it in front of me with the Netflix show. I'll think of it, believe me. But you have the BTK killer, these John Wayne Gacy's, the guy who shot up Las Vegas. These are individuals that we largely consider to have, we believe they have this antisocial personality disorder. And it's not like there's not a biological element here. The individuals that we have studied, and we've had access to quite a few of these people, because they typically don't end their lives when they get caught. Guys like Ted Bundy, because they think and believe that they can beat whatever rap you want to bring at them. They're very narcissistic. So very often they don't think they're going to get caught. So when they do get caught, we've caught quite a few of them alive. And so we've done Stephen Douglas, or not Stephen Douglas, something Douglas, the guy who wrote Mindhunter, who wrote the book for Mindhunter. He did spend considerable time with these particular individuals. Whether it's David Berkowitz from Son of Sam. I know that the new episode will deal with the BTK, bind, torture, killer, I think we just caught that guy like 5 years ago. He'd been going on forever. That's what makes these individuals so difficult to catch, is that confidence, and that confidence makes their killing very random. Very difficult for us to kind of nail down. But when we have found them, we have studied them, and one of the biological elements, I just listed off Cleckley's whole list, the charm, intelligence. But then there's the biological part is really interesting as well, because that whole frontal lobe that we typically see with analyzing situations and exercising restraint. You know how I always joke that teenagers, especially young males, the prefrontal cortex has not developed to the point where it has good judgment and things like a conscience until you get to be about 18, 19 years old. So without that development, you can do really stupid things as a kid. So what we have found in a lot of these psychopaths, sociopaths, which are the categories of antisocial personality disorder, is they have very low-level frontal lobe activity. And so what that obviously does is it enables them to kill without any guilt. There's no processing of guilt going on in there. There's just, they see other humans as at their disposal. And that's what makes these antisocial personality disorder individuals that do become violent so horrifying. Because, it's not like Silence of the Lambs where we're making suits of skin, but I mean, it could get close to that, because you don't recognize, if you have this, the autonomy of another human being, and there's no empathy for that. That's all stuff that comes from the frontal lobe. And we have seen that there's just not a lot of frontal lobe activity going on with these individuals. So we are trying to see what, one of the things, if you get caught, for something and you go to jail, you volunteer. You'll see this in Mindhunter if you watch it. Don't watch it if you get creeped out by, if it's going to give you nightmares. But if you love psychology, Mindhunter is brilliant, and it is just astounding. It's good acting. It is really solid. Got a little bit of a dumb storyline in part of it, but but it's a good show. I can't wait for the next season. But we are starting to experiment and see if we can encourage more activity in the region of the brain where that empathy and conscience would occur. So, we'll see. Look, I'm going to talk about therapies in a minute right now. Therapies are, we're experimenting. We're experimenting with hallucinogenic drugs. We're going back to electric shock therapy because of the endocrinological response and using it for depression and anxiety. Like, remember the old school, we're going back and reevaluating, did that produce good results? And some people say yes. So everything is about becoming, getting these neural networks to these pathways to break out of the funk that they find themselves in and move towards something that produces a higher quality of life. That's what we're dealing with here. We're trying to help people develop a higher quality of life. Abnormal psychology typically deals with individuals that their quality of life, due to the abnormal elements of their psychology, has declined. Now, I spoke to you about someone with, for example, bipolar disorder, which is characterized by mania, extremely high highs, very low lows. This is an example of individuals where modern science, a lot of them don't like to use, and I've mentioned this, the innovations with pharmaceuticals that we have come up with, because they feel like their quality of life goes down from the bipolar state. That's an interesting conundrum to run into. There are even schizophrenics who refuse to take their meds because it kind of knocks them out. So this is where some of the experimental stuff we're hoping to work with. I just listened to a podcast with Elon Musk talking about the implanting of microchips in the brain. This is a brilliant potentiality. If we could actually go in there and kind of redraw neural pathways, because we know we can look at a normal functioning happy person and we can see how their brain works. So now it's a matter of trying to get the brain of the abnormal psychology patient to function more like the normal, and with the goal of improving quality of life. That's the goal of this. The goal is an experimentation. The goal is to improve the quality of life. Depression, anxiety, like a generalized anxiety disorder. These people are, it's horrible. I mean, you talk to them, they don't sleep well. They're at a heightened state, sort of a fight or flight state at all times. You've got this cortisol release, and you just never feel relaxed. So that's the goal of a lot of the new stuff we're doing. On a traditional level, we have several major types of therapies. You have your psychodynamic, psychoanalytic approach, which is the Freudian approach. This approach is an attempt to try to discover the root, the unconscious root of what it is that's troubling you. Right? So the methods are that were created by Freud and his followers were the primary method is something known as free association, in which you lay down on the famous Vienna couch and you are going to give the first thing that comes to your mind. Now, the reason Freud used free association was because he was leery of resistance. And resistance is the individual that is on the couch fighting the process. Freud wants to get to your unconscious mind so he can confront the root, the actual root, get down to the root of the weed and pull the weed out so you can look at it and go, oh, it's just a weed. Now I get it. That was Freud's approach. And the free association enabled Freud to get stuff from you without resistance, and that's also why he would have you laying down. I believe like Freud originally wanted to be in a different room to avoid transference, which is where you transfer some of the emotions you're feeling onto the therapist. He originally was like, I'll just be in a different room so there's no transference. But that's the goal. And by the way, the psychoanalytical and psychodynamic approach is still common today. It's still used quite frequently to go back through memories and try to confront issues of your past that you may still be manifesting in anxiety or depression. It's still a very popular approach. Now, one of the things a theorist by the name of Elizabeth Loftus, her mother had died in a swimming pool accident, and I believe she thought she saw the body, and later found out that it was her aunt or something to that effect. But she, in the 90s and 2000s, has kind of gone at the idea of memories from the perspective and kind of gone after psychoanalytical therapy, because she was able to demonstrate through this study, which involved kids that are lost in a mall, and they have to recount. A couple months later, they have to recount exactly what occurred in the mall, and a lot of their memories were fabricated. Okay? I believe that's confabulation is the term. They put in things that logically they thought in retrospect should be there. So that's one of the drawbacks of the whole psychoanalytical model, is the fact that we have kind of seen that there is a propensity for us to invent or confabulate what we think should be there. So I can remember first grade waiting, right now I'm going off the cuff, for waiting at the door to be let in after gym class. Now, I could probably convince myself that I could keep going with that memory, but how much of that would I be inserting into the story based on generalizations? This was what Elizabeth Loftus's major issue with psychoanalysis was. If we're going to dwell on the past, the past very often misrepresents itself. By the way, this is common in, we have done studies with this and used some of her stuff directly for the legal system, witnesses. because witnesses will often confabulate, will put stuff in that they think logically should be there. And it's not like you're doing it maliciously or with intent. You're putting stuff in, and the brain does that to create a logical progression. This is what Loftus's work was so invaluable towards. Like, she was able to show us that we really will put the stuff in so that our recounting of something that happened a long time ago makes sense. It's a natural brain function. So there's psychoanalysis. Freud, Jung, Horney, Adler like to use this going back. When we get to the humanists, now we're at like your Maslow and your Rogers. So they're going to be much more interested in, if you go in there, like, okay, so psychoanalytical. You go in, you're suffering from generalized anxiety. They're going to approach it from, let's go into the unconscious of the individual, find the childhood trauma that you are still confronting on one level or another, and let's exercise that, and you'll be able to move on. Not terrible stuff. It does play a role. Now we get to the humanists, and humanism is more about the present and the future, not the past. So something like insight therapy. The therapist is simply trying to get you to have epiphanies about who you are and the big picture, and how to be not to worry about the past, not to get caught up in the past, because humanists believe that the past should not cause any kind of problems for you on a psychological level. That the past is the past. And now how you live your life going forward is really important. So you have insight therapy, which is very consciousness-based, not unconsciousness-based. And it is present, future, not past, like the psychodynamic, psychoanalytical school. And they also, with insight therapy, we are also trying to get you to take responsibility in the here and now. So what can you do to change, the situation that is causing you anxiety? That's very humanist. Now you bring, insight therapy, you combine it with Carl Rogers and his client-centered therapy, where Rogers will sit there and listen. Active listening is Carl Rogers. It's not like, this is sort of the one where you see in TV shows where the therapist just falls asleep. It seems like that, but that's not the point. The therapist has very creative guiding questions to get you to take a look at what it is in your life that is causing you to have depression or anxiety. And he slowly wants, the humanist slowly wants you to come to realizations. The therapist isn't going to say, I've got the answer. Okay? No, it's, how far have we come is client-centered therapy. There is what's called an unconditional positive regard, which is the goal. Like, hey, look, I want you to have an unconditional positive regard. Look at yourself through a positive lens, not this negative lens of how terrible a person you were back in your teens, or how awful you were to your employees yesterday. Let's go forward and let's make better decisions emotionally going forward. Okay? So it's ridiculous to dwell on treating your employees terribly yesterday. Instead, treat them really well tomorrow. Okay? And so that whole client-centered therapy is all about you got to find a way to look at yourself as good, though flawed, for you to be able to heal. We also have cognitive behavioral therapy, which I always kind of classify as a humanistic therapy. But cognitive behavioral tries to get you to change both the way you think and act. Okay, so I probably was just describing cognitive behavioral therapy. That's a better example, the treating your employees like crap. So you treated your employees like crap, and you feel terrible about it. Well, let's come up to the here and now. Why did you treat your employees like crap? Let's address why. What is it about your employees that made you feel like you could treat them like crap? Okay? And so you address the negativity that you are holding yourself to. Like you're in a cycle of negativity. We need to get you to focus on positivity and practice it. Cognitive behavioral therapy requires practice. So next time you're in traffic, find a way to look at the traffic as a great opportunity to learn something. Okay? And put in a 40-minute or an hour-long podcast and learn something there so that your association with traffic is no longer terrible. And then don't flip off anybody. There's the behavioral. Cognitive, see the traffic as something that's not that horrible. Behavioral, stop getting high-strung, rolling down the window and flipping someone off. I just flipped someone off on the camera here. Okay? It's all about having a more positive approach to everyday settings, and training the brain to not see someone as adversarial, to not see a situation as pointless, but to see things as positive opportunities and then act, behave as if it's a positive opportunity. Cognitive behavioral therapy. Okay? Those are the major therapies, and I've been rambling on for a while. Look, I've done a lot of videos. You kids have been amazing. I know I give you a little talk at the end. I don't think anybody's watching this video right now. If you get to this point, feel free to drop me an email and say, Mr. Walter, I actually watched that last video. That's all you got to say. But one thing I can say to you is that you have been amazing. You have tolerated my learning this process. I have, look, I'm a lecture teacher. That's what I do. I get it. And so get on camera and, lecture, and hope someone listens. But you've been amazing. This has been really tough. I want you to take this last lesson should kind of tell you that there are really good therapies out there. If you've had a really rough time in this period, and maybe it's just been depression, or maybe it's been anxiety, or you've just developed a mood disorder where you're just you have these ups, highs, and lows. Whatever has happened during this, know that we are doing incredible work in the field, and that the most important thing for me to impress upon you in psychology is there is no stigma to getting help with the brain. If I break Oh, here's a good example. So I don't know if you can see this, but I can't straighten that finger. I can't. I tore a ligament there. I'm gonna go get it fixed. You know, I'm not gonna live the rest of my life. That's literally the way. Can you see that? That's the way my hand is now. It's a real guitar. It's fine, but typing, it is a nightmare. It's like a little dead tip on my. So I'm gonna go and I'm gonna get a splint, and they're gonna put it in a splint. The brain sometimes needs a splint. It is not a stigma to need some help with your psychology. And that is the one thing that we have been battling. Those of us in this field have been battling for years. It is the same as a cold. It is the same as a virus. Schizophrenia is the cancer, because 1 in 100 people could end up with schizophrenia. I think that's a legit statistic. And like there are varying degrees. If you need help, get help. The sooner the better. The sooner the better. I love y'all. I hope to see a bunch of you when you drive through May 18th. And take care of yourselves and give your families a big hug for me.